The nation gathers, waits with bated breath to uncover just exactly what Kwesi Adofo-Mensah will do with his 2025 first-round pick at the trade deadline. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day, each and every day. I appreciate it so very much. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Today's episode is Twitter Tuesday. That means I'm answering your questions as submitted to me via email, which you can send me an email anytime at lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com or fill out the Google form in the show notes, and I'll get around to it by the next Tuesday. You can also just send them to me on Twitter when I put out the calls sometime every Monday. The first question I'm going to answer today comes from Gimpy, who asks, do you think they don't want to trade for defensive players because the scheme is too difficult to learn in just a few days or weeks? So a few questions about the trade deadline. What are the Vikings' needs? What are they going to do? What's the deal? I did an episode last week about what I thought maybe the Vikings could do at the trade deadline. Cam Robinson was one of the options that I discussed. I did not like the idea at the time because I thought they would have to take on a lot more money than they did. Jacksonville took on most of the money, and the draft compensation was lower than I thought too. So way happier with that than I thought I was going to be. But a couple of the other ideas, there were some corners, some D tackles I flung around in there. I don't know where you're getting the idea that they don't want to trade for defensive players. Darren Wolfson has been reporting for months that they're really interested in trading for defensive players. I think the beat has been kind of hinting at it, that the Vikings are maybe looking to make a splash. Maybe Cam Robinson was that splash. After all, it is a 8-year starter changing teams. But the compensation wasn't really the kind of splash you maybe are thinking of when you hear the Vikings are looking to make a splash. So the trade deadline is today at 3 p.m. Central, if I'm not mistaken. So that's going to be something to watch and hopefully keep you distracted while you go do your civic duty, if you do live in the United States. Something for you to chew on while we wait for to see what the news is going to be like tomorrow. But the question at hand about learning the scheme in a few days, I don't think Flores's scheme is more difficult to learn than changing any defensive scheme is obviously going to be a difficult thing. But if that were prohibitive, nothing would ever happen at the trade deadline. So I don't think so. If it were still Zimmer, maybe, man match stuff and all the adjustments and little quirks of that are pretty difficult to get down. But if you're like a D lineman, you have to learn a handful of stunts, and the way that it's called mixes and matches those sort of ingredients. All you have to do is memorize the ingredients, but you don't have to memorize every page of the book as it all comes together. Flores is mixing and matching and sort of building play calls, and you just have to know what the blocks are. So it's not all that tough. Obviously, things in the secondary are a lot tougher too, but I think they keep those things a little simpler to learn and then harder to uncover. The illusion of complexity, right? That's the whole philosophy. So no, I both don't think that they don't want to trade for defensive players. I think that they do. We'll see if they can get a deal done, right? Like, you need to find one, and you need to find a deal that you like. That's not guaranteeing that one will happen, but it does seem like they're trying if you're to believe the reports. And I don't think that the scheme is prohibitively difficult. I'm like the first couple of weeks, maybe temper your expectations for that guy, but I don't think it's something that makes the deal, something that goes totally off. Swedes Goal asks, Cowboys look like a disaster. Dak and CeeDee take up a ton of their cap, and Parsons remains unsigned. Do you think Micah Parsons could be made available via trade? I wouldn't put anything past Jerry at this point. I think I don't know if he really has a plan at all. I think he's just doing whatever his brain and the chemicals that it may or may not have produced are telling him to do. And with that said, I have to imagine that whatever the Cowboys' plan is, even if the Cowboys are going into like full on hit the plunger, rebuild, fire everybody mode, I think if you want to rebuild, don't you do it around Micah Parsons? Isn't that like the guy you want to have in the building to sort of be the foundational cornerstone that you start building everything else around from? So I don't know if I would guess that he would be available for trade. I also, as funny as it might be, I don't think the Cowboys are looking at this like a dead season in the way that maybe the Panthers would or the Jaguars clearly have been. I just don't think they really run it that way. But I'm going to answer all of these. You guys sent me a bunch of questions that are like, what about this player? What about that player? It's all going to be a shrug. I have no idea what's going to happen today. Okay. No idea. Just sit back. By 3 p.m., you're going to have your answer. I'm just going to sit back and watch the fireworks. Jeff, if there even are fireworks, it's always a little bit lamer than you think it's going to be. Jeff L says, I was wondering what you thought happened between Bradbury and Ingram on that play that gave the Colts a defensive TD. Okay, a bunch of you asked about this. So here's the deal. I have a Patreon video coming out, should be out sometime today, about the O-line. Everybody on the O-line gets a little bit of a breakdown, right? From how did Cam Robinson do, a little update on Brandel, Ingram, Bradbury, even a little bit of love for O'Neal. Everybody. That play comes up. Of course it does. So here's what I think happened. You might have seen replays of it and people saying that pointing out that Bradbury stepped on Ingram's foot, kind of slipped, and that's why he got like thundered so bad. And Jeff L sent an email and he wrote up a whole thing about like how this is such an egregious error and what can they do to prevent these things from in the future. Don't slip. I mean, it happens though, right? You get your feet tangled up on people trip and fall over on the O-line all the time. And there is, I think, an element of bad luck that not only does that turn into a sack because you slipped and fell right away on your first step, but that it turns into a strip sack, and that the strip sack not only does it get recovered, but it gets scoop and scored and, gets recovered in stride for a touchdown. Like there's all kinds of other elements of bad luck in that really get to you. But ignoring all of that, I think the actual issue here, and Ed Ingram, getting stepped on and getting, tripping people and like this like really funny thing that keeps happening. So on that play, Ingram's responsibility, and pre-snap he knew it was going to be his responsibility because of the blitz that the Colts were showing, was going to be an edge rusher that was going to cut inside. And Ingram made the choice to pass set vertically and to really try to get a lot of vertical depth on that kick slide. So when you kick step backwards, I mean, you kick, right? Like you kick like a horse. So that foot goes way back. And that's a long thing to happen when it comes, when you're talking about the scale of time that steps happen. It's a long step to take. And that means that your front foot doesn't move. And you're next to a center who sets up wide, right? He's the Bradbury is, the guy that in Minnesota history, he has had the second most problems with a wide stance. It's how he's always set up. And he does that because he is a smaller player that goes up against bigger players. You're going to see a lot of centers do that. That is not a thing unique to Bradbury, but that's his solve to that problem, right? You got to do something when you're 30 pounds lighter than the guy across from you. And I don't think that asking Bradbury to change the way he sets up is the solution, because that's going to make him more susceptible to just straight up bull rushes from even nose tackles that don't really have a pass rush. So what I think the solution there is, Ingram, I want him to take shorter, choppier steps to get to that same spot rather than one big long one, especially when you're going up against a guy that is, halfway to the numbers. He's going to take a while to get to you, to get to where you're going. So you got a little bit of time to set up. You don't need to try to get it all in one big, giant, lopey step. Get your feet set up, get your inside foot out of Bradbury's way so that he can set up. Get yourself out of the quarterback's way so that you're not stepping on his foot or whatever. Short, choppy steps, get a little more horizontal and not so vertical. Get yourself out of the middle of the play, right? Get yourself to a nice place. As the guard, you typically want to be, unless there's a slide or a big split, like equidistant between the center to your left and the tackle to your right. And Ingram just set up too close to Bradbury. Bradbury slipped, fell, thundered, disaster. Have a whole bunch more questions that I want to get to, so we will continue onward next up on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Game Time, the best place to find last-minute tickets, or not last-minute tickets. I'll actually have the privilege of being at the upcoming game, Vikings-Jaguars. If you are also going to come to Vikings-Jaguars, but you don't have your tickets yet, go check out Game Time. I've had a great experience with Game Time every time I've used it to get to a sports game, but you can, of course, get to concerts, comedy, theater, all of that stuff. I always have the all-in pricing toggled on, so I can see exactly what I'm going to pay at checkout. No hidden fees, no nothing. You know exactly what the prices are. And then as you're comparing that around, if you can find the same seat or same section and row to that event somewhere else for a different price, the Game Time lowest price guarantee means that they will credit you 110% of the difference. So if you don't know what you want to do for a Saturday night, let Game Time take you on a journey and get last minute tickets to some really cool event. Find a cool deal for you. The more options you give Game Time, the better deals that they can find. It just depends on how open-minded you are to what you're going to do this weekend or whatever. So go check it out. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. This episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. It's where Locked On Vikings gets all of its betting lines and props for things like this over-under, or just for generally referring to how people are viewing these games. And right now, new customers can get $5, can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if that bet wins. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. Live stats, play-by-play, information that you need to make a decision. So if you have a hunch, go follow it at FanDuel. Even if you're going to go sign up for FanDuel and your first bet is like minus 1,500, the shortest odds ever, the most likely thing in the world, okay, go hit it. Put $5 on it and get 150 back. You can get 30-1 odds on something that's minus 1,000. Where else are you going to find something like that? Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, whether you're live betting or taking spreads, props, over-unders, whatever normal stuff. You can find it all at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Moving on here with the Locked On Vikings podcast Twitter Tuesday episode. Again, when you're done here, go check out patreon.com/LukeBrownNFL. Chances are by the time you listen to this, I will at least be close to having an O-line episode up that you can go watch right now if you are a patron. Next question comes from Carlo Skoll, who asks, it is very clear by now that we will have to ride the Darnold roller coaster every week. Yeah, you said it. But are there still things that can be coached out of him, or at this point he is who he is? I mean, look, you can always improve, right? You can always work to improve in little ways in terms of timing and rhythm and stuff like that. And you're going to have ups and downs of days. But I don't think that's what you're asking about. You're asking about like Darnold's risk-taking behavior, I guess is the way that maybe you would put it. I think that you could. Like, he's a coachable guy that you could sit him down and say, stop taking those risks. You must check down. You can't throw into these windows. You could restrict him really bad if you really wanted to get that out of him. If you just needed a really safe quarterback, you could do that. But I don't think Kevin O'Connell's gonna. This is the thing about Darnold is like a lot of these mistakes are made. They're born out of over-aggression. Kevin O'Connell loves over-aggression. He himself makes mistakes born out of over-aggression. They're two peas in a pod. They're a match made in heaven. They're a match made in Vegas. I don't know. I mean, it's perfect. So could you? I think you could probably restrict him and make him play this super tightened up, like backup quarterback style of football. But Kevin O'Connell ain't going to do that. I don't think that he's going to watch that tape and go, Darnold, you have to be, I mean, you say, take care of the ball more. But he's going to identify, you should have seen that linebacker lurking, or, let's talk about how you progressed on that one. That was the dagger that probably should have gone to Addison. That ended up being the pick he threw toward Justin Jefferson. But yeah, I don't think O'Connell is going to like rein him in risk-taking wise. Deck with 2 C's asks, Gink seemed to be the one losing out on reps to Dallas Turner. Couldn't Ginkle just play stand-up linebacker, especially when pace went down for a bit? That's exactly what happened. That's what they did. They also spelled him more. But yeah, Andrew Van Ginkel and Dallas Turner are going to be taking reps from each other. There's only so many reps to go around. Turner's going to get some, Gink's going to get some, but they play the same role. So they're going to be more rarely on the field together than, say, Grenard and either one of those two guys. Ryan asks, Cam Akers for sure is RB2 currently. Is he for sure RB2 currently, and why is that? Yeah, it seems to me like he is. He definitely got the nod. I don't think Ty Chandler got any snaps last game, so that's interesting. But why that is, I mean, look, he was ahead of Ty Chandler on the depth chart last year before he got hurt. And he was traded again, mid week 2 this time, but he was traded to the Vikings and immediately overtook Ty Chandler on the depth chart as RB2 to Alexander Mattison and looked like he was maybe on his way to taking reps, and he was starting to take reps away from Mattison too. So Kevin O'Connell loves this dude and sees him as a contributing player. So I'm not too surprised to see them lean more into Cam Akers now that he's like been here a couple weeks and he's like back to getting used to things. In terms of why, he is, I think, a little better at understanding when he can and can't be greedy. I don't think he's as good at it as Aaron Jones is. Aaron Jones is definitely great at that. And Cam Akers, I think, is only pretty good at that, but sometimes gets himself in trouble with like bouncing a run that he shouldn't bounce. But he's better at that. I think he's a little bit burstier. I think Ty Chandler seems to me like he has taken a step forward this year, but I think maybe so is Cam Akers. So I think he's just better running back. I don't know what to tell you. Natalie asks, how is Levi Drake Rodriguez? He only played field goal units. That's it. So nothing too much to write home about there, although being active for his first game, congratulations. Taki Taimani was hurt. That's why he was active. And Taki Taimani, I think, just like going back to preseason, Taki was definitely a better player than Levi Drake was. Taki was insane in the preseason. I mean, against threes, right? But he's actually been a pretty good rotational nose tackle for the one drive he gets in a game here too. But yeah, no, Levi Drake only did field goals. Diversified offense enthusiast asks, in addition to tempo, it was really nice to see them sprinkle in quick passing game to sustain drives. What other types of schemes and concepts could you see the Vikings incorporating into their offense to keep the chains moving and avoid 3-and-outs? So for what it's worth, a couple other people asked something like, why did the offense slow down sometimes? Why is it streaky? This is not the week to be worried about that. The Vikings offense moved the ball well basically every time they got the ball. No 3-and-outs for one. The only quick possession that they had was the one where Darnold threw an interception on the first play, which is not like a systemic issue, right? He just made a mistake. So that's nice. But to answer the questions, so you're basically looking for what's their easy buttons, right? What are their kind of nice rhythmic things? And this question answers the Josh Oliver question a bunch of people asked too. That was why did Josh Oliver suddenly have a game now that why wasn't it TJ Hawkinson? So TJ Hawkinson played a little less than half the snaps. So they're clearly easing him back in workload wise. So Josh Oliver took over some of those roles, or continued to take over some of those roles. And one of those roles is being the underneath guy on what I'll call keeper flash. This is a rollout flood play where you usually will have one clear out. Maybe that's like a corner. Maybe it's just a straight up go route. And then you have in the run fake on a rollout, the backside tight end fakes block, and then he flashes out to the flat, right? And you saw Josh Oliver catch 3 of these. And then you'll usually between those 2 routes, so that's a deep one, and then you have your shallow one, and you have a medium one in between those 2. That's like a deep over, or it could be like an out coming from the same side, depends on the formation. And that's one that you really usually is what the play wants to try to hit. And then 90% of the time it ends up going underneath, and you're totally fine with that because usually you're stretching things out so much to that side that it deepens corners, and you get to move that upfield. It's a very easy completion. It's not easy mechanics, but as long as you can execute a rollout which Darnold can very consistently, then you can get it to there. So those little things are a nice quick game. It's not quick game, but it's sort of in that same. it's a rhythm game, right? It's like, here's your little easy, quick 5 yards, get ahead of the chains, set up 2nd and 5, and get yourself in rhythm to start the game kind of play. Those are really nice. They like spacing. They like return routes. They like choice. Choice is a big one. I would call choice quick game, even though it's usually paired with something that can go deeper in the progression. So it's quick game that can elongate if you need it to. So there's a lot of those there that Kevin O'Connell can work to. Steezo asks, who is the kicker you want to sign to the practice squad as insurance for Will Reichard? I have no idea. There's like 2 healthy free agent kickers. One of them is Riley Patterson, who has been not great. I think he got cut from the Lions recently. He did get cut from the Vikings a bunch of camps ago, so that would be a kind of funny return to him. But then there's like old kickers that haven't been in the league for a long time, that are like names you remember from a while ago and then it's a whole bunch of like undrafted college dudes that didn't make a team. A lot of John Parker Romos, maybe it's him himself. I don't know. Probably if they do bring in a name, which according to Darren Wolfson, they are going to try out kickers and long snappers. Andrew DePaula hurt his hand and is a candidate for short-term IR. So they are going to need a long snapper in the meantime. So I'm going to guess that somebody there also joins on Tuesday. That's probably going to be part of the news, in addition to if they do anything at the trade deadline. So they're going to do a little bit of special team shuffling. That'll be something to watch. But Reichard's quad thing, he's been hurt, I guess, or he sustained an injury in the game, they're now saying, which is not the way that it was mentioned earlier in the week. I think maybe there was a backtrack there, but they're saying that Reichard got hurt in the game against the Colts, and it's like a quad thing. I think he's like day to day. So they're going to see if he's available or whatever, bring in another kicker. I have no idea who it's going to be though. I will finish this one up with some of the less serious questions, although there's still a couple of serious questions. So stick around. We'll get to that next. This episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by BetterHelp. BetterHelp is online therapy made easy. If you've been thinking about getting into therapy, which I highly recommend getting into therapy, especially dudes, guys, we don't think about our mental enough, all right? We got to take care of that. And for me, therapy it's like having a personal trainer, but for your mental health. It's just as important as your physical health. It's a maintenance thing, not just a doctor you see because you feel mentally sick. That's not what it is. Not to me. So if you want to give that a try, consider giving it a try with BetterHelp. Online, flexible, suited to your schedule. It can be via video, phone call, whatever you are comfortable with. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Next up here on the Locked On Vikings podcast, a right-wing German, wow, Matthias, I didn't know you moved like that, says, how extreme are the adjustments teams make for Jefferson in the second halves of games that lead to him, quote, disappearing, and why are they not starting out like that? You know, cat and mouse games are like that, and Jefferson does tend to hit in bursts. I don't know if it would necessarily be more normal, though, if he got like 3 catches every quarter, and then that's a 12-catch game. Like, sometimes it can come in bursts where it's not necessarily that the Vikings that Vikings opponents are making adjustments and then he's disappearing. It's that they're keying on him really hard, but they don't have the patience and the fortitude to stick with that for 60 minutes. Teams have come out, okay, we're going to too high, we're going to bracket, we're going to double, we're going to do this, we're going to press him, we're going to do that, we're going to be physical. And that works great for a while until he gets open. Maybe sometimes teams just don't do that. And then eventually, if they're going to do all that and give him a bunch of attention, which the Colts did. The Colts gave Justin Jefferson a ton of attention. The gravity thing, he changes the weather or whatever the broadcast wanted to say. And Josh Oliver wide open, right? Big Addison game. You got TJ Hawkinson downfield. Like, other mouths get fed there. And they're open because of Jefferson. I think sometimes when we talk target share, it's like we want 3 guys to be able to catch the same ball. Why isn't this guy getting more? Why isn't that guy getting more? It's like, well, their answers are each other. But with Jefferson, it's like when they lapse, when they go, man, we got to play this straight up. Jordan Addison's killing us. That's where the Colts were, right? Addison 3 is killing us. We got to play this straight up. Oops, now he avalanches for 6 catches, right? And that's exactly what the Vikings want teams like the Colts to be stuck in, where they're just in this rock and a hard place where they go, my God, if we don't dedicate everything to Jefferson, he's going to kill us. And if we dedicate everything to Jefferson, we get killed by all these other guys. You kind of need to do what Aaron Glenn did and say, he's going to get his, and we just got to hope we win the game anyways. And I think teams that aren't willing to do that, that don't have that kind of the cojones that you need to say, Jefferson's going to get $160 on us and we're going to try to win the game anyways. Like, if you're not willing to take that, then I think it's really hard to consistently get off the field against the Vikings. So in those games, you feel really, and I think the only other way to really truly neutralize Justin Jefferson is get to Sam Darnold and make him screw up, right? Get 10 sacks and Justin Jefferson doesn't matter anymore because you can't throw to a guy from the ground after the play. That doesn't work. Grill asks, with Oliver playing and TJ back, is it time for more 12 personnel? Sure. The Vikings are in a nice spot because I think their 11, 12, and 21 personnels are all in a really good way right now, right? So like in all of those packages, Jefferson's on the field, Addison's probably on the field, or maybe you rotate him with Naylor or whatever, but one of those other wide receivers that you feel good. In 11, the other one is on the field. You always will have Hawkinson on the field, right? You'll always have Aaron Jones. So you kind of have 3 or 4 of your skill players pretty much all the time. And then whether that 5th guy is Josh Oliver or CJ Ham or, the other receiver, you can be pretty happy with all of those. And that means you can walk into games with game plans that look so different from your other game plans that it makes you hard to scout. So is it time for more 12 personnel? I would say if the other team is bad against 12 personnel, then yes. But not necessarily. It doesn't have to be, right? If that other team is maybe a slower defense, you want more 11 out there, then yeah, absolutely, let's do that. And having access to all of those tools, you don't have to use every single one every single time, right? Again, you don't need to have 20 guys on the field getting every single snap, right? These guys can come off to the sideline. Don't worry, you're not wasting your investment by rotating a guy out so he can get a breather or so you can get personnel in that's better for this particular situation. Draw Goblin, not saying that that's what you were saying, Grill, or anything, but I do kind of get that sense sometimes that people get like anxious about somebody like Hawkinson coming off the field because we want to be in 10 personnel this time because we've got, this play we want to run that needs 4 wide receivers for it. That people get like anxious about, oh, that's a lot of money on the bench for that play or something. If it is not, it's fine. That's also part of the game, and the most efficient uses of these guys might not be having them on the field every single time. That might not be the way that you get the most production out of your team. Draw Goblin asks, what are your honest thoughts on the ref's justification for picking up the flag on that blow to the head, which resulted in the only TD for the Colts? My honest thoughts? I gave them last episode, but so you can listen to that, but abridged version, really bad call, indefensibly bad call. And the excuse of we didn't see it is essentially an admission that you're too incompetent to do your job. I also don't buy it. There were refs looking right at it, that the white hat who threw the flag was standing behind it. So I could see how he got mixed up and thought maybe that the contact was to the shoulder. But the other umpire the other guy back there had a line on Sam Darnold's face mask and should be able to see it. If you can't see it, you probably should. If you can't see it from that, then I think you might be literally like, I don't want to be like ageist, but maybe I do. Like, you're too old to be a ref. I'm sorry. You need to have sharp eyes for this job. And if you don't have sharp eyes, if you don't have a quick eye, you can't do this job. Scully Polly asks, do we need to go out and get a new QB? Not because of Darnold's play, but because it's illegal to victimize a QB unless his name is Sam Darnold. Do we need to get a new QB so that refs won't ignore blatant penalties? Yeah, you'd need like an old QB. Like you need like a Flacco if there's one out there that's like an older QB with a legacy reputation that the NFL would want like a story to be made if he has a good game, it's like, oh, look at him go. That where you like patronize him. that kind of guy gets all the calls. I think about when I think it was a ref, or maybe it was a player trash talking Cam Newton, said, you're not old enough to get those calls, which was just a wild thing to say because he was like in his 4th year. You need someone who's old enough to get the calls. The Duck says, can we talk about Addison's absurd catch? Yeah, man, it was awesome. There's not much to say or analyze about it. It was really cool. Go watch a replay of it. Chris asks, since it's the midpoint of the season, which players would you re-sign this offseason that are on expiring contracts? Great question. I'm not going to go through like the whole list of guys right now. That's an offseason topic, but I think there are guys in the secondary that are worth it. Shaq Griffins of the world, the Byron Murphys of the world for sure, Cam Bynum for sure. Maybe there's a tag worked in there somewhere. I would love to bring back somebody. Like I would love to bring back Aaron Jones. I don't think that's in the cards. I think they probably want to get somebody homegrown going, not just kind of veteran it. Somebody like that would be great. But I think my focus would mostly be on the secondary, which is essentially entirely made of expiring contracts right now. Probably got to stem some of that. And then last question I'll do today comes from Sam Root, who says, whose TD catch was better, Addison or Blue? Okay, here's what I need you to do, okay? I need you to watch that mascot thing. It's on the Vikings YouTube channel, or it's definitely on Vikings.com. They tweeted it as well. You need to watch Blue make a catch. So they did a mascots versus the youth team. It is my favorite halftime festivity that they do ever. I love it so much. The mascots are just ruthless with these children. It's so great. They played a Maple Grove youth team, and in it, Blue, the Colts mascot, made a diving awesome catch, which in a mascot uniform, I got to imagine that is not like loose and free flowing. I got to imagine that thing is a little restrictive. And he made like a diving catch in the end zone. It was awesome. Whoever was in the blue costume, absolutely cooking, but Addison's catch was better. I will see you all tomorrow. Probably talk a little O-line, maybe some defense. We'll see what strikes my fancy. Maybe we'll have a trade deadline thing to talk about. I'll see you all tomorrow. And as always, Skol.